Good evening and welcome to the February 5th regular meeting of Council. The City of Parksville recognizes the people of the Coast Salish Nations and their traditional territory upon which we gather with gratitude. First item is the adoption of the minutes of the Council meeting January 15th, 2018. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Beil. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Second item is the approval of agenda. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Burden. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The next item of business is new business. Oh, look at that. So let's do new business. Look at that, a new change as a result of a council motion that was passed some time ago, not some time ago, very recently ago. Last meeting? Okay, so we'll go about new business. Let's start over here on the right here with Councillor Burden.
Thank you very much. It was certainly a busy time over the last little while. I did attend the curling, the men's provincial championship. What a great event for our community. I also attended the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere Reserve quarterly meeting on Friday, and an interesting piece of business came through that meeting where the coming out of the G7 discussions, Canada has committed through their biosphere reserves to plant 100,000 trees across Canada. Now, 25,000 of those trees have been gobbled up by Quebec, leaving 75,000, so 25,000 left spread across Canada. And there's been a request from the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere Reserve that Parksville plant 1,000 trees. Now we're not going to actually do the planting if this gets further along. Island Timberlands and Timber West have agreed to provide the trees. The Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere Reserve people who are basically the research arm of the biosphere from VIU are going to be looking after recruiting a group of young people to plant the trees. Their request of the city is to provide a hectare of land to plant the trees. The land must be protected for a period of at least 50 years, and the trees need to be planted before May 15th, 2018. I would like to propose a motion this evening to have staff report in a timely fashion with some viable options as to where that hectare of land could come from.
Moved by Councillor Burden, seconded by Councillor Beil. Any discussion? Councillor Burden, any further?
It's pretty clear.
Councillor Salter?
I do agree with the motion. I do support it. I just have one issue with it, which is with regard to Ermineskin. I think if the plan were to plant these trees in Ermineskin, that we would want to include Christopher Stevens in it so that he could provide information and perhaps some good direction to the city and council.
Do you wish to respond to that, Councillor Burden?
Yeah, so at this point, while I think that would be an option, I'm not suggesting any particular location at this time. I'm merely looking for direction from staff with regard to where we could plant 1,000 trees, where we could find a hectare of land to plant 1,000 trees. The Parksville wetlands would be awesome, but I'm leaving it open.
Thank you, Councillor Burden. Any further discussion? So the motion is to have staff prepare a report on options for where a hectare of land could be to accommodate the request. Councillor Beil?
Thank you very much. And I presume, though, that this doesn't have to be a single block. In fact, it might be possible to, but that generally it would cover 1 hectare overall but this in fact might be other areas, and it needs to be protected for a period of time, that suggests to me that it could even be possible that the land does not have to be owned by the city. It might be in working with another group. I mean, just saying if that's the best place for trees. Is that your understanding as well, Councillor Burden?
Yeah, as long as the trees are protected for a minimum of 50 years.
Any further discussion? See none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Do you have anything further, Councillor Burden? Thank you very much. Councillor Salter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. whatever it is, acting mayor, sorry. I just have one thing, and that is that I did attend the staff appreciation banquet, and I have to say that it was a pleasure and a privilege to be there, and it's so nice to see how the hard work that our city staff put into ensuring that Parksville is the great city that it is. So I just want to say, and the food was great. So it was a great evening, and it was a pleasure to be there. So that's all.
Thank you, Councillor Salter. Councillor Beil?
Thank you. And I would like to add that, yes, it has been very busy. Since our last meetings, I've attended a meeting of the Oceanside Task Force for Homelessness, and also they've continued to work very hard behind the scenes, and also with supporting the shelter, the cold weather shelter the cold weather shelter that's set up in town. Also with the library board, and the library board has a very involved and extensive plan for all the libraries that are included in Vancouver Island Regional Library, and with the Parksville Library will be coming up for some refreshing, particularly with regard to the flooring, but we don't have the actual date for that yet, but that will be coming to a library near you. The Oceanside Community Arts Council is preparing for the AGM, which is coming up before long, and new board members are absolutely welcome to join. You do not need to be an artist who is creating work for show. You might be a supporter of the arts. So if you're interested in such a thing, absolutely think about looking into the board, and one can go on the website, which has been updated considerably, and or stop by the MAC, that's the Macmillan Arts Centre, for more information. I also had the pleasure of stopping by watching some of the curling this weekend, and also seeing some of it televised on Shaw, the local channel, and it was really fantastic, and that parking lot was full. What a great activity to bring to our community in the off season, and the facility looked great. Also, the staff appreciation was well attended, and it was so nice to see so many of our staff members receiving certificates, acknowledgement for the many years that they've been working for our city. I had the pleasure of attending the opening, I guess it was a celebration at the new film studios, which have been set up just outside of town, and it was at the completion of the second round of students who have been working there, taking courses to do set building and grips and lighting. So now there's a total of 135 students who have gone through the training program to assist with television and film production. So it was a really great event. There was a lot of waiting and quiet on the set, but it was really pretty exciting, wonderful to see this come to our area. And my final piece that I would like to share with everyone is to encourage support for the Coldest Night of the Year event. And I have a motion that Council continue its support for the Parksville Oceanside Coldest Night of the Year 2018 event to be hosted on Saturday, February 24th, 2018 by the Island Crisis Care Society by waiving the city's special event permit damage deposit requirements.
We have a mover, we have a seconder. Councillor Salter.
Okay. If I can follow up.
Councillor Beil, follow up.
Thank you. The Parksville Oceanside Coldest Night of the Year event is a fun, family-friendly walking fundraiser organized by Island Crisis Care Society to raise money for the hungry, homeless, and hurting members of our community. The walk will happen not only here, but in hundreds of other communities across Canada. Walkers can choose between a 2, 5, or a 10-kilometer walk. The walk allows participants to see a hint of the challenges faced by those experiencing homelessness in the Oceanside area. And the funds raised are really critical to continuing to provide support and to tackle this issue in our community. So if you haven't had a chance to take part or don't really know too much about it, please consider this opportunity. Hopefully there'll be something in the paper and one can Google it, search for it online, and you'll be directed to our community to learn more. So that's all I have to say about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beil. You're obviously passionate about that cause. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. I guess I'll go next. I guess I should have gone first, but I'm gone off script again. There will be a special meeting of Council on February 26th. In January, Council passed a motion to refer the report and proposed City of Parksville Subdivision Servicing Bylaw 2017 number 1540 to a special council meeting. In accordance with Section 126 of the Community Charter, the Mayor may call a special meeting in his or her discretion. Therefore, in my capacity of acting mayor, I am announcing a special council meeting to be held on Monday, February 26th at 6 p.m. here in the Forum. It's a little different conversation than the tree one we just had, I think. The next one is the St. Paddy's Casino Splash fundraising event. The Parksville Lions Club and the Rotary Club of Parksville AM continue to raise funds for the city's new splash park. The next event is St. Paddy's Casino Splash on March 17th with a fun casino, appetizers, and snacks. Tickets, which cost $60, may be purchased from Maryland Travel, Parksville Chrysler, and the Mount Aerosmith Brewing Company. And I believe that event is being held at Parksville Chrysler, if I remember correctly. The Springs Grant and Aid Program, a reminder, the deadline to apply for the Spring Grant and Aid is March 1st. $2,500 in funding is allocated for the spring intake and will be awarded by Council upon recommendations from a select committee. The application is available at City Hall or from the website. Water main flushing. The city's annual water main flushing begins February 13th. Things that are not announced at council meetings in Alberta right now. And will run for the next 2 months. More information be found on the city's website. And finally, offices closed for Family Day. The city offices will be closed on Monday, February 12th for the Family Day statutory holiday. We hope you can enjoy the day with your family. I too want to echo the remarks of my fellow councillors with respect to the staff appreciation dinner was there. In addition to being a long-term service award, it was a good night to say thank you on behalf of council and the city for our hard-working staff. And one thing that happened throughout tonight that really struck me was the number of people that came up and received their long service awards and then hugged the supervisor. I think that's a real testament, and hugged in a friendly way. I think that's a real testament to the leadership and the staff that we have, and it was really good to see that. And you know, I have to commend our employee, the CAO, for developing that culture there for those people to be so appreciative. I had the honor of attending the welcoming for the Syrian family that moved to our town here some weeks ago. Councillor Beil was also in attendance. I was touched by the family unit, you know, transcends borders and transcends nationalities. The family unit is something that's near and dear to everybody, and anybody that you know, wants to make a better place for themselves or a better life for their kids, my book, hats off to them. And it was good to see those little kids there. Kids are kids, you know, and that's a unifying factor, and it was touching to be there. And lastly, it's been a good couple of weeks. Lastly, I was at the new citizenship ceremony a couple of days ago with the Order of Canada recipient Deb Gray, our MP Gord Johns, a couple of people from the province, and they presented the citizenship certificates to 74 new Canadians and their families, and it happened here at the community center. And I'll tell you, the enthusiasm with which those folks took their oaths and the genuine smiles when they came up to receive their certificates was touching. It was something I was really honored and privileged to see. And I just want to share with you that we got some really, really strong additions to the fabric of our country from what I saw walking across in front of picking up their certificates the other day. That's it for me. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. And so I have to report on the Downtown Business Association. They're going to have their AGM on March 6th at the Beach Club at 6:30. March 19th, they're going to come and do their budget presentation to the city. They told me that they did consult. They've heard from the engineers that we consulted with on the new subdivision bylaw, and they're very supportive of it because it's clear and concise. They know what they have to do. They were also curious, as am I, on the traffic calming for 19A. I know that at least two resolutions have come forward from this council, and so I just want to put that out there because I see it on a list on the agenda tonight. So, and then I did attend the Chamber of Commerce meeting, and they're already planning for Canada Day, which is going to be a big one this year, as every year, well run. They're very happy to get the extra $7,500 that the city provided to them, so it should be a good event. And the rest was just normal chamber business that I don't think is interesting.
Although there's other councillors that may disagree.
Yes, there are. But it's like this, you know what I mean? Yeah. Just keep out home.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to touch on a couple of the other councillors' notes and everything. BC leads in film dollars across Canada, and so I think that is just amazing. It was touched on also at the Parksville Qualicum Beach Tourism Association that it brings tourism dollars as well as jobs into our economy. I did attend the Parksville Qualicum Beach Tourism Association, and I'll be bringing some other information forward a little later in dates. I also I met with Gord Johns after he like yourself attended the citizenship, and he was very moved, and it was a really interesting conversation to hear and that from him. With some of my students, they'll probably be coming forward again and giving a little bit more information on a trip, another group of young students that will be building a school in Nicaragua. So I thought that would be interesting, and I've asked them to come forward as a delegation, so they'll be coming forward in the next month or so. Councillor Beil touched on coldest night of the year, but again, I just want to reiterate it is February 24th, and I've been a long-time supporter and continue to be. And even if you don't walk, you can support a walker or donate, and you can donate online and that. So I'm just going to reiterate that as well. And I was at the MAC. Macmillan Arts Council last week, and there's some amazing artwork in our community, and artists in our community. So I urge anyone to go and visit and even become a member. It's I think a $10 or $5. I'm not sure what it is a year, and that it's a really good cause again. So I touched on my students, and then I just wanted to touch on the building to Yep, directionally challenged, so straight that way. Our Parksville Community and Conference Center is looking for 2 interim board members to fill some seats, so I thought I'd put that out there since we have a full audience. And sitting on a board is really rewarding, and this community is made up of so many volunteers that we don't recognize as much as we could, because there are just so many of them. And Parksville doesn't be the city it is without those volunteers in our community. So I think that's pretty much it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson, and thanks for the reminder. Yes, there will be some vacancies on the Community Centre board, and that's been a board that's been together for quite a number of years, and they've done a lot of fantastic work. And the 2 people, they're moving on, and it would be a great opportunity for someone to come and help the community by getting on that board. We really need some more community involvement there. Councillor Powell, I believe you inadvertently skipped something.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I have skipped something, and it's probably most important. I would like to put forward a motion on proposed budget meeting dates, that additional open meetings of council be held on Monday, March 26, 2018, and Monday, April 9th, 2018, in the forum at the Parksville Civic and Technology Center, 100 Jensen Avenue East, Parksville, BC, for the purpose of budget deliberations.
We have a mover. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Burden. Any discussion? See none. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have some budget meetings. We have 3 delegations tonight. The first one is Cedar Ridge Subdivision Residents, Park Maintenance Concerns, a presentation by Karen Charlesworth and Brian Hartwig on behalf of Cedar Ridge Subdivision Residents regarding concerns about maintenance standards in the city park located between Parkling Place and Retegno Avenue. Welcome. You have 10 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Karen Charlesworth, and I am presenting a PowerPoint presentation which illustrates concerns some residents have about the maintenance of the park and walkway between Parkling and Retegno Avenue in the Cedar Ridge subdivision. Maybe I could, just before I continue, how many councillors are familiar with the subdivision and the parking? After this presentation, myself or one of the co-authors, Brian Hartwig, who's beside me, Gary Duchet, or Diana Howard, will be happy to answer any questions that you have. And I just wanted to confirm, so this is recorded. Okay, let's start. Okay, as you can see, these are pictures
Thank you very much for your presentation. You obviously became well prepared. Are there any questions from any members of council? Councillor Salter.
Thank you. So my question is, I'm wondering why there isn't a citizens group for you to take care of this area, since it is right outside your front door and you're willing to do it. I know that we have Friends of Foster Park. We're allowed to have, they deal with Foster Park. We've got volunteers, the Parksville Lions, the Sports Association. There's a lot of volunteer groups that do take care of these things. So have you requested that, or?
Well, I think it's during my presentation we were told.
Oh, okay.
We were told that primarily because of concerns with the union, I specifically mentioned that we could perhaps talk to the union and pursue it further. We were not interested in doing any money out of any jobs, but if there was no funding or personnel from the city to do it, we were willing to do it, and I wouldn't have minded approaching the union and talking to them just to see what their position was. In any event, that's where it stopped right there.
Thank you.
If I may add, that only solves part of the problem. If you walkway that goes around the subdivision, fine for everybody. After that, I think you look confused.
Councillor Salter?
Sorry, I actually have some hearing issues, so I kind of missed some of what you were saying.
Okay, a group to look after the park is part of the solution. The walkway that goes around the whole subdivision, which is the boundary of Parksville and the RDN. And if there's been a concrete fence built, everything, it's a disaster in terms of weeds and mold and everything. Looking for I wouldn't expect the community to look after the walkway as well.
I think residents had initially been willing, had undertaken. I'll get older. These are two city lots, and as you can see, they are full of really invasive species. To say that it would become citizens' responsibility may not be the best option.
Councillor Powell?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to the Director of Engineering. I don't want to put you on the spot. I know you're not the Director of Operations. But I remember in 2008 we did a big budgeting process where we prioritized what things we were going to pay for because of the crunch. And one of the things that we did drop off was the parks, the maintaining of the parks, because we had to make some tough decisions. And so we decided that we needed to do health and safety. We needed to ensure that our administrative services were up to standard. We had to meet our legislative responsibilities. And so the parks, unfortunately, we dropped out of Communities in Bloom because we couldn't afford to do it. And I'm wondering if this was part of that process to let it go natural instead of keeping it, maybe I should go to the CAO, instead of keeping it trying to maintain it.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Powell. I don't think this was part of that issue at that time. I don't think even this subdivision was around.
I know that park wasn't around, but we still haven't changed that process. We still are not maintaining our parks the way we used to. We did do the field in the community park after it got trampled on, and so we needed to pay more money for that. But we have not changed that priority list, to my knowledge.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Powell, yeah, I believe that's the time that it was identified sort of 3 levels of types of park and an amount of care that we would, the community park being the highest level of care, and then the term was correct that was brought up. An outer park sort of was the lowest and those types of parks would be left to be naturalized. And really that sort of effort is to try to I guess use our resources that we have in those areas with those parks with the highest use and the highest risk. That was part of that effort.
If I could just add one thing here. Aside from the, I guess, aesthetic appearance of the parkway, as is stated in the presentation, there is legislation, and I researched it as best I could, and I asked for a reply from the city, and the city never did get back to us. I wanted to confirm my interpretation of the legislation, but aside from a general appearance, when there's legislation that tells you that you cannot have plants growing above a certain height, you cannot have these weeds in there, the legislation doesn't say you can cut them down when it's convenient to you. When there's laws, the laws apply to the residents and they apply to the city equally. Now, I asked in my initial letter that wasn't responded to if the city could clarify that and tell us, are we reading the legislation improperly? Is there an exemption clause somewhere? I couldn't find it, but again, just to impress upon the city, if there is legislation, that applies to the city of Parksville just as well as it applies to any of us residents. I can't let my front lawn go wild because I wanted to return back to nature, and I don't believe the city can do that either, at least not within the confines of the legislation. If they say no grass over 30 centimeters, that's your bylaw. The city of Parksville enacted that. As I said, unless there is an exemption, and if there is, I would appreciate knowing.
Thank you. Councillor Beil.
Thank you. And I would like to say thank you. I can appreciate the amount of work and preparation that's gone into the presentation this evening. I have a question perhaps for Mr. Figuera or perhaps for Ms. Coldest, and that is regarding the fact that we have in fact approved with the budget the hiring of additional park maintenance, park labor, and the way that is structured is that we will be able to hire, let's say, 3 seasonal people, and I'm curious to know if that will help alleviate some of the maintenance concerns for some of the parks outside of the community park.
Your Worship, if you don't mind, I can respond to that, but I would like to just provide some clarification first. When this development was created, there was a development permit put in place, and there was a quote-unquote new form of landscaping that was created under the development permit, which was supposed to be low maintenance and to have as little an impact as possible on the city itself, because at the time council wasn't accepting additional parklands, and council hasn't accepted additional parklands for some time in terms of development. We look for financial bonusing in place of park amenities, but the reason that it wasn't developed as a traditional park was to reduce the maintenance costs. With respect to the invasive species, when the residents brought pictures to the meeting with Mayor and I showed them to the park staff, and they immediately identified that yes, there were invasive species in there, and as I explained to the residents at the time, that there's a certain time in which you remove invasive species so that they don't return, and that staff would be following the provincial standards for removal. For instance, I believe there was some broom removed by the residents, which was removed improperly and at the wrong time to remove broom, and as a result I know that they're going to have that broom come back because it wasn't done correctly. So and with respect to the park, the citizens doing work in the park themselves, there was a time in the past when that volunteers were they helped out with gardening, they helped out with plantings, they helped out with communities in bloom, They helped out in all sorts of areas. Unfortunately, times have changed, and the liabilities that are placed on the city, not just the fact that it's union work, that's a component of it, but it's the liabilities to the city. For anyone to do any kind of work, they have to be covered by workers' compensation. And if they are not, then they come under the city's workers' compensation. And that can be an expense to us. What if someone cuts themselves while they're hacking away at a weed, or does serious damage or has an accident? Then that falls on the city. So as a result, volunteer citizen groups are unfortunately not an easy thing to accommodate in this particular day and age. With respect to, now I'm going to forget the question that you asked me, but with respect to the addition of the park staff, that was primarily brought on board for the Ermineskin lands and to maintain the higher ranking parks. We are and have been in the past stretched with our park staff in terms of maintaining the fields in the community park. Now we have Ermineskin and Foster Park and our higher ranking parks that are closer to the center. And so there may be some positive impact on our outer parks, but I can't guarantee that at this point in time, other than to say that we will certainly maintain our regular schedule for mowing of the grasses, because the mowing in the parks is done on a regular schedule.
Follow-up, Councillor Beil?
Thank you. Also, it is my understanding that although in the presentation it indicates that the park is to go natural, but it was my understanding that it was more that natural type planting was what was supposed to be in place, and I'm not sure that that's exactly the same thing. But my question is really to Mr. Figuera. Mr. Figuera, with the information that the residents have brought forward, is this something that you, with your parks staff, will be able to have a look at to decide if there is something that can or should be done, or perhaps it has already been looked at, and in fact there's some sort of a plan in place, for instance, to address the any weeds. I know that broom is looked at by the park staff if they go into a park and are removing something that's identified as a noxious weed and they see broom. I have been told that that would be removed, but it does have to be done, as Mrs. Coma said, at the correct time. So, Mr. Figuera, any thoughts that you could share with us?
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Beil, what I think needs to happen is staff need to be given direction on what sort of level of service that's expected of this park. Certainly we can, as been explained, we'll go in at the right time to remove the noxious weeds and address that issue. But right now this is considered basically an outer park, and we need to understand what sort of level we're talking about, and to understand what the impact is going to be on other parks, because that's what's going to happen. We'll just have to compensate, but the level of service on some of the other parks is not going to be quite as high as it is now. It's just a matter of spreading some resources, because as the CEO has said, that 1.5 position was really for trying to address the Ermineskin lands and taking on that. So.
Thank you, Mr. Figuera. Councillor Salter?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two things. Ermineskin is a natural park now. And Cedar Ridge is a very heavily developed area. So when I look at resources, the difference between Ermineskin and who would be impacted by someone not cutting the grass or not noxious weeds, etc., as opposed to Cedar Ridge, they don't even compete. Cedar Ridge is a densely populated area. I would like to make a motion that council determine Cedar Ridge to be a heavily densified area with a park enclosed within it, and that it be maintained according to the bylaw 1383 that we ourselves have passed and supported. So I would like to support maintaining this park, and especially the tall grass that happened in the summer. I saw those pictures, and that's a fire hazard, and it's heavily densified. So there could be a lot of very dangerous, and a lot of very bad things happening if there was a fire in that park.
Do we have a seconder for the motion? Do you have anything else, Councillor Salter?
I do. What I see are, I see a room full of residents who have been requesting the city listen to them since at least August of 2017. And it's come to this, where you've come to present to us, and I would say that you have not done that. It looks like you've done everything you can do to address this and to ensure that you and your families are safe with regard to certainly the dry grass and the weeds and the children playing out in the prickle bushes, etc. So I do support you, and I support the city ensuring that that park is kept and maintained in a fashion that one would expect in a subdivision. So that's what I have to say, and hopefully this motion gets seconded by some other councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Salter. Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Worship. So I'm just going to touch base on a couple little things. This development, or this area of our city, isn't that old in respect to some of the other parks and everything that we have in the community. And I think that, unfortunately, when it was developed, that the developer did a disservice, and not by having it as parkland and having it dedicated, and that because obviously it was never going to be looked after to the standards that we might be accustomed to in other areas of the community. I would suggest to Councillor Salter, rather than having a motion put forward to ask that it be maintained, that we refer this back to staff. And as a council, then it will be looked at. So could I have a seconder, please? Or you never got a seconder.
There was no seconder, Councillor Salter. Councillor Patterson has now made a motion to refer, which I believe Councillor Burden seconded. That will unfortunately end debate on the night, but there's no, if this is passed, there's no debate on a motion to refer, so I'll call the question. All those in favor of referring to staff? All those opposed? Motion is successful. It's being referred to staff. So we won't be discussing it any further this evening, unfortunately.
I am very disappointed that the legislation not brought up on everyone. The bylaws that we are asking you to support. I'm really disappointed that you have not chosen to enforce your own bylaws.
I'll make some comments in response to that. The bylaws certainly apply to residents of the city as they do to the city. And if I don't mean to be facetious, but if you feel there's a bylaw infraction, report it to the bylaw department. That's one solution. Or we could try to work together. I personally think it's a good problem for a council to have a room full of people that obviously shows so much pride in their neighborhood. I'm certainly very well familiar with that neighborhood. I lived on Humphrey Road when that park was 200-foot cedars that you're talking there now. So it's a manufactured park. There's no doubt about that. That was all 200-foot cedars just 4 years ago, not very long ago. I think that your idea of forming some sort of committee to establish what different levels of parks are is a fabulous idea. I think that because a development is in what might be considered an outer part of the city doesn't necessarily mean that the park should be considered an outer park. So I think the notion of people getting together and deciding what sort of standards and what sort of levels we should have for our parks, and different levels would require different levels of servicing, and with that would come a price tag which council would then have to struggle with. But I think that's exactly what we need so we don't run into situations like this, right? To have people leave a council meeting upset and dissatisfied because they're unable to do what they want to do to show pride in their neighborhood is a shameful thing, in my opinion. So I think we need to work together to get to where we are. I'm hopeful that when the report comes back from staff, something like that, and your PowerPoint suggestions there tonight are taken seriously into consideration, because I think that there are some good things here. I don't think there's any instant solutions for you there tonight. I think both sides of the discussion have valid points, but I do think there's an outcome there that everybody can be happy at, and I just like to see everybody work together to do that. After the matter has now been referred to council, for me to or any other council to make a motion to form such a committee would be out of order, because the matter has been referred to council, to staff. Once it comes back from staff, I assure you, if I'm in attendance at council that night, I will be making a motion to have some sort of committee formed to establish standards for parks, because I think that's a great idea and it's a great first step. It may not achieve what you want tonight for your particular park, but it would be good for us to have standards going forward. Maybe it's time to revisit it in part of our parks plan, and maybe it's something that's already being revisited. But I think that that's a good idea. So, but because the matter has now been referred to staff, there's little we can do until it comes back. Councillor Salter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say that, in fact, when one does do a referral, they can date that referral. So they can request a response back or a report by a particular date. So if you did want a date, or if Councillor Patterson wished to provide a date, that might be useful, and that might be valuable certainly for our residents who have been waiting now for over a year.
Ms. Comas?
I'll refer to the CEO one.
Your Worship, I just wanted to remind the audience and council that we are just initiating the Parks and Open Spaces and Open Trails consultation process, and that process would be a perfect opportunity to make your views known so that when that report comes back, hopefully that report will contribute to determining levels of service in the various parks around the community. That's what it's designed to do.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Beil?
I would just like to add that I really do have a lot of sympathy and empathy for the situation. I just can't sort of blindly support services for one park at the expense of others that have also been here. I agree there needs to be working towards some solution, something that addresses any hazards that are there, something that addresses aesthetics, something that addresses the reality of our maintenance and our staff needs. But I can't just say, yes, we'll put everything here, and then what happens to other areas in other neighborhoods. And I think that we need to see the full picture, and I don't want to imply that I want to abandon your situation. That's not it at all. And thank you, really thank you for coming.
And that ends that discussion. Thank you very much. This is our second delegation of the evening. It's the Mid-Vancouver Island Habitat Enhancement Society, project update and rainwater management. I understand it's a presentation by Peter Law of this organization to thank Council for the Faye Smith Memorial Tree, to provide an update on current projects, including a report on the hydrology of Shelley Creek, and to provide comment on rainwater management within the proposed City of Parksville Subdivision Servicing Bylaw 2017 number 1540. Mr. Law, you have 10 minutes.
Starting now. Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, City Councillors, for allowing me to speak tonight. I'm here representing Mid-Vancouver Island Habitat Enhancement Society, or MVIHES. We're the local stream keepers focused on assessment and restoration of healthy streams for fish in the Englishman River and its tributaries. On behalf of the members of MVIHES, I'd like to thank Parksville Council for their dedication of the tree and plaque in Parksville City Hall property in memory of the passing last March of Faye Smith, our society's project coordinator for 17 years. She was a strong advocate for fish and fish habitat in the Englishman River and Oceanside area. She will be missed. Thank you very much. You will hear more this evening in a presentation after mine from Qualicum Beach Stream Keepers about their efforts to develop an interpretive center on the Qualicum Beach waterfront in Faye's name. MVIHES fully supports their efforts. In the remaining time I have with you, I'd like to highlight how our volunteers have been assessing Shelley Creek's health and what we need to do to restore the proper functioning of this watershed. If we do nothing, we fear a slow demise of Parksville's last fish-bearing stream. I will also provide a summary of a report we recently had completed on Shelley Creek's water balance, which we think provides evidence that existing engineering standards for subdivision servicing used in the RDN and the city pertaining to stormwater are harming natural flows and should be amended to allow for rainwater to feed soils to sustain healthy watersheds. Why are we so concerned about Shelley Creek? Well, there are a number of reasons. In the water sampling done in the watershed with the RDN over the past 6 years, this creek has the highest turbidity or sediment values when compared to other streams in the entire regional district in Nanaimo every fall. The smolt fence counts that we operate in the spring months over the past 6 years continues to show that the lower wetland reaches of Shelley Creek are important as an overwinter habitat for Englishman River coho salmon juveniles. Habitat assessments of the channel in 2014 and 2015 done by our volunteers show that changes to the stream channel over the past 16 years have resulted in severe erosion and deposition of fines into pools, and spawning areas and the wetland have started to fill with sediment. This, coupled with low summer flows, is placing this stream's future for producing salmon and trout in jeopardy. So some of you may ask, where the heck is Shelley Creek? Well, this stream is located in the lower Englishman watershed and enters the river at the Orange Bridge. The headwaters of the creek is in Arrington, around the Little Mountain Bellevue Road area. Watershed's about 5.2 square kilometers and passes through multiple jurisdictions. Area F, Area E, and the RDN, and of course within the city. Land use varies from rural properties in the headwaters to private forest lands to urban residential lands to agricultural lands. Co have access to the lower 600 meters in Reach 1 and resident trout through Reach 1 and Reach 2. So in the upper right-hand corner. In 2015, we sponsored a geomorphologist to review channel conditions and make recommendations on how we could restore these erosion sites. He flagged multiple sites suffering from severe channel erosion, and he gave us a prescription to restore one of the worst sites. The photo on the left is 50 meters upstream from the photo on the right, where our project occurred, where the riprap was placed to protect stream banks from future erosion. Funding assistance to complete this work was from DFO and the Pacific Salmon Foundation to fix a problem caused by the City of Parksville's own culvert at Blower Road. Bottom line here is that the site looked, if you look at the right-hand side, looks like a flood control channel rather than viable fish habitat. So our members asked, what will the future stream condition look like if we have to armor multiple sites like this in this small stream? Now, I want to just make sure that you understand, erosion is common in small streams in a natural condition. There's been many reports done in the years that elevated stream erosion in small urban streams have been linked to increases in impervious areas and loss of forest conditions in a watershed. But we were asking, is that what's happening here in Shelley Creek? So in July 2016, MVIHES contracted Jim Dumont, a professional engineer and agrologist who specializes in rainwater management and design for over 35 years in British Columbia. We wanted him to answer two questions: what is causing Shelley Creek stream erosion and sediment, and how can we restore the stream's health so that in 50 years from now there still will be fish? The report titled Shelley Creek Water Balance and Sediment Reduction Plan is in 2 volumes. Volume 1 is the Physical and Environmental Investigations, which is a detailed compilation of factors which influence the stream's hydrology. Phase 2 is Computer Modeling and Assessment. This report uses a water balance modeling approach to estimate stream flows under various conditions and provides mitigation strategies on how to restore hydrologic function. It was signed by a professional engineer. For us to understand what is meant by restoring hydrologic function, we should quickly review the hydrologic cycle. And we see the diagram, rainwater circulates through the environment. However, not all rainfall enters the stream. It travels into deep groundwater, it evaporates, it goes into various directions. Land development activities can disrupt this cycle, increasing the volume of surface runoff and causing multiple impacts to a stream. A fundamental concept of the water balance model report was to use the water balance methodology that predicted how stream flows will react to measures in mitigating changes to the drainage caused by development. This is true rainwater management, where natural precipitation is seen as a resource to maintain or to restore the natural water balance within a watershed, with a goal of restoring the stream's health so it can flow year-round and sustain fish. When rainwater hits the ground in a watershed, water flows in 3 primary pathways: surface runoff, right across the surface; shallow interflow, which is the shallow unsaturated flow or sponge composed of surface soils that is generally 1 to 2 meters in depth. Water can take up to a year to flow through these soils to the stream. And then there's the deep groundwater, where it passes through the water table and goes down into an aquifer, where it can take multiple years before it returns to a stream. To determine how rainwater reaches the creek in Shelley, we had Jim review the watershed's environmental and land use condition from published sources. The report said, on average, approximately 1.2 meters of rain falls in this watershed every year. From the modeling, he estimated that natural flows in Shelley Creek are made up of 80% of that 1.2 meters. The table here shows that the rainfall pathways in red, we see that from those rainfall pathways in red, we see that interflow, or the surface sponge soils, contribute 60% of the water entering this creek's channel. The report concluded that the biggest influence on water flows in Shelley Creek over the last 40 years has been ditching and draining of this interflow, or the sponge soils. A drop of rainwater now travels to the creek in hours versus weeks or months, as would be the case in natural conditions. So what does that mean for the Shelley Creek channel? Now, all channels or all streams are subject to varying flows. We look at the stream in cross-section, you can visualize these flow events: mean or average low flow, average annual high flow, and then a larger flow that occurs every 2 years, then the big 1 in 100-year flood. The modeling has shown that in Shelley Creek, flows that cause erosion are a result of an increase in the number of hours that the creek flows at the 2-year flood range. Today, Shelley Creek now has 5 times more erosion-causing flows than it did 40 years ago. It will have 14 times that based on current development patterns. So how do we slow the water down before reaching the stream channel? The report used a water balance model target to keep the 3 flow paths in balance by not infiltrating too much, but by allowing interflow to occur and to discharge the water in the stream within a season. These targets that you see here have been developed for Shelley Creek, but can be used for all land developments in this region. It sets targets for retention, infiltration, and release rates. An easy way of visualizing performance target is the cross-sectional view of a properly designed rain garden. Yeah, rain gardens, a huge benefit to fish. They sink and spread and slow down the rainwater. These targets are now being used in the Comox Valley and Cowichan regional districts. There are 6 other proposed recommendations for slowing down the flows in Shelley Creek, and I'm not going to discuss them, although some of them are within the watershed and some of them are within the stream area itself. I'm not going to discuss them here tonight, but we are going to be working on them over the next number of years. It'll take years to perhaps decades to complete this. The last thing I wanted to just share with you is that this winter, MVIHES volunteers are out spending our time in the winter months knocking on doors on homes in this watershed to inform them of the study and discuss how they can help at the site level to slow water down. The last item I just wanted to touch on is the comments concerning the subdivision approval bylaw 2017-1540. In particular, Appendix 1, the engineering standards and specifications. From the water balance study that we have just finished doing on Shelley Creek, we can see some inconsistencies in future direction in how rainwater is managed in the city. MVIHES were never consulted on this bylaw. We never knew it existed until about 2 or 3 weeks ago. We're willing to work with your engineering staff to discuss the report and make recommendations on the various sections of this bylaw. It's a massive bylaw, so I'm not able to review it tonight. However, I did want to touch on 3 items. One is the bylaw is based on a 2016 stormwater plan. This stormwater plan, after reading it, is not a rainwater plan. The second item I want to make quickly make is that there are no rainwater performance targets in the subdivision approval bylaw. And the last item I just wanted to make note of is that sediment and erosion control is mandated. However, there are no water quality parameters set to make this basically a non-enforceable piece of information. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Law. I'm wondering, we're having a special meeting on February 26th with respect to the servicing bylaw, and those items there, is it possible that you could get those to us as in form of comments for that meeting, these items here that you address as concerns for you in the proposed bylaw?
Absolutely.
If we could get that on the record, that'd be wonderful. Do we have any questions or comments from council? Councillor Burden. And then
Just a
Councillor
quick
Beil.
question about what the recent excessive amounts of water that have been coming down Shelley Creek have contributed to the issue. Is this a 2-year, a 5-year, or a 100-year?
So, Councillor, the actual Shelley Creek does not have a monitored flow. So we had to, in our study, actually use Bings Creek, which is down in the Duncan area, as the confirmation flows. I didn't look to Bings Creek to see it, but I would suspect that we're probably in a very significant. We're higher than the average 2-year flow event. 2-year flow is like a bank full flow. That's a 1 and 2 years right to the top of the banks, and at various locations in Shelley Creek we were over the top of the banks, and in some locations, so it was probably a bigger than a 1 and 2 year flow event. In the Englishman River, it was a huge event.
Councillor Beil.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Earlier in your presentation, and thank you very much for all the information and for being willing to share this with us. You mentioned that you would like to have the opportunity to work with engineering or provide input and so on. I'm wondering through to Mr. Figuera, is there anything to preclude members of the Mid-Vancouver Island Habitat Enhancement Society meeting with you or your assigned person to share the information that they have for the purposes of informing this bylaw as it goes forward?
Before I go to Mr. Figuera, I believe the CAO would like to jump in here.
Yeah, sure, Worship. I just wanted to confirm, just with respect to the river flows, that we received confirmation from the provincial water river flow forecast that this particular past event was less than a 2-year flow. Yeah, the province has confirmed that. And with respect to, we have parts 1 and 2 of the report that was commissioned, and it's in the hands of our engineering department, so we have access to that information.
Yes, I actually met with Mayor and Mr. Figuera back on October 13th. So I have provided them with all the documents. However, I would love to provide comments on your bylaw.
Any other members of council have any further on this issue? Well, thank you again for your presentation, and really appreciate the work that you do. Our streams and our rivers are critically important, and I'm not just saying that because I like to fish. But so our next delegation is the Qualicum Beach Streamkeeper Society. It's a request for support of Wildlife Interpretive Center project. Presentation by Peter Drummond and Pat Jacobson of the Qualicum Beach Streamkeepers to request funding support in the amount of $2,500 to aid in the construction of a wildlife interpretive center on waterfront properties owned by the town of Qualicum Beach. Welcome, and you have 10 minutes.
Thank you, Your Honor, and the Council for agreeing to listen to our story here. My name is Peter Drummond, and I'm sitting next to Pat Jacobson, and we're both Qualicum Beach streamkeepers from Qualicum Beach. I would first bring your attention to the picture up there, and of course, Faye Smith needs no introduction here because she's the founding member of Qualicum Beach Streamkeepers, of which I've been a member of for 18 years, and she's also a founding member of the MVIHES, which you're also aware of. We are dedicating what we're talking about here to her memory. We go on to the next one. Yeah. Just as an overview of our project, this had its origins last March when a few of us were down at the beach in Qualicum Beach, and we recognized there was a special opportunity that presented itself on 5 town-owned lots down there, which some of you may recognize as the Brant viewing platform area. The present site has a small platform that was originally constructed in 1995, and it is now in a state of disrepair and is served by an unattractive gravel parking lot. So we formed we had some ideas about this, and we formed a small organizing committee and developed a plan and presented the idea to the council, who became very supportive of our idea. With the skills of retired architect Bill Lipsey, who has designed around the world, we found a design that was suitable for the site, and we came up with an elevated 440 square foot pavilion would be suitable for the site. It'd be accessed by 2 ramps, so it'd be wheelchair accessible. And the function here would be an educational interpretive idea that is contained in 10 panels facing the ocean. So this is right just above high water mark. And those panels would summarize local ecology, shorebirds, i.e. the Brant, marine animals, salmon runs, largely coho and chum, First Nations history, and human impact, i.e. sea level rises, and commercial and recreational fishing. Go on to the next. So that is a picture of the Brant viewing area as it stands right now. It's very coarse and is almost unworkable right now, so it really needs an upgrade. Do you want to go on to the next? So we have a vision after working on this for about 10 months now. We have a vision and goal, and that is our wish, that nobody, when we finish with this site, will leave the center without a better appreciation of the wildlife and the surroundings. Just a word about the structure that we hope to put on the, well, we're going to put it on there. The structure itself, where am I here? The 10 interpretive panels that I mentioned there will be contained within the structure itself, the 440 square feet, with a clear view of the ocean. It'll be open on all 4 sides, and the panels will be situated in the front area. In terms of the design, the access will be from the south side, which is the side that you see facing you on the lower right of the picture above. Do you want to go on to the site plan? Here is the site plan. So this was devised by Lanark Landscape Design, local designers, and they've been very helpful, and we've worked very well with that team down there. The area, I guess I don't have a pointer here, but the area to the immediate left there, the circular area, is called a gathering circle. It will be an outdoor area for areas for teaching school children, or for like a park area. It will have permanent seating. And the back of that, on the south side facing us here, will be an acoustic berm. On the middle right will be 15 parking spots and a bus parking spot on the lower left area. So what we're catering to, of course, are tourists. We're catering to local residents to come down there and view and to learn, and also for school children. So we certainly hope this is going to achieve all those ends. Thank you. Over to you, Pat.
Okay, the pavilion that Peter described is going to embody the signs about this spectacular place we call home with all its wildlife, its unique ecology, and First Nations heritage. Both the Parksville Qualicum Wildlife Management Area and the Mount Arrowsmith Biosphere region will be featured, as will a profile of the late Faye Smith. Faye, who gave our Parksville Qualicum community so much in terms of her leadership, extraordinary commitment to making amazing things happen at so many levels over a course of 23 years. Whether it was explaining to school children how a watershed works or coordinating a $1 million project like the Englishman River Recovery Project, she was focused and relentless and an inspiration to us all. You can see that we'll have other interpretive material on the site as well, and one feature that we think that will be very popular is a 180-degree panorama identifying all of the geographical features that are seen from the shore. And we have a good group putting this information together, including the Arrowsmith naturalists. We see it as a big opportunity, as Peter said, for residents and visitors to Oceanside, as a new place for school classes with its covered pavilion and parking for a bus, for community groups like newcomers to get familiarized with the area, for eco tours, as well as being a venue for events like the Brant Festival that I know Parksville heavily is invested in. And one of the biggest benefits to our whole area will be the facilitation of all-season use. We had a meeting with Blaine Sipos of Parksville Qualicum Tourism, who thought that was a big feature of the project and saw some good tourism marketing opportunities from which Parksville will benefit. Qualicum Beach Streamkeepers are raising $90,000 to complete the pavilion and the signage, and we've raised almost 70 to date, including the Pacific Salmon Foundation donation of $20,000 to help us with this project. So we've got broad community participation with contributions from some 70 individuals and organizations, including $2,500 from the RDN and some significant donations from area realtors who see this as helpful in their area. Our target date for dedication is April 22nd, 2018, and that would be on Earth Day. So we think this will be a significant additional amenity to Parksville Qualicum and a fitting tribute to Faye Smith. And we'd like to suggest that the city of Parksville might want to participate with a contribution, which we have suggested at $2,500.
Thank you. You're done?
Yeah, that's our presentation.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Just for clarity, what is the total project cost?
The total project, this is phase one of what Qualicum Beach is doing, redeveloping the waterfront. So that particular area, this is phase one, and we'll be spending $90,000 to $100,000, and they will be spending a like amount to do the landscaping and preparing the site for this, amenity.
Thank you very much.
And then they'll be spending further monies on that particular site in phase two.
Okay,
but our contribution is in this first phase.
Thank you. For any members of council have any questions? Councillor Powell?
Thank you, Worship. I'm sorry, Pat, it's kind of confusing. You've got the projected cost is $90,000 and you've raised $69,000, and then if you go down further, you see that Qualicum Beach is donating $100,000. And is that because they're matching funds to what you're raising?
Well, to some degree, but it turns out that the matching, I guess, $100,000 funds from Qualicum Beach are to prepare the site and landscape the site, to accommodate this new interpretive structure.
So I knew Faye very well. I very much respected her, and I saw all the work that she did for Englishman River and how she revitalized that, and that was an at-risk, an endangered river.
Sorry, I can't hear. not hear you.
That was an endangered river before Faye started working on that.
Oh, in the Englishman River.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think that we did plant a tree, and I would like to make a motion that we donate $2,500 from our contingency fund in support of this for Faye.
Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Salter. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Burden and then Councillor Salter.
When I originally looked at this on our agenda, I thought, why are we contributing to the town of Qualicum Beach? Your presentation has convinced me that this is something that's certainly going to benefit the region, and I look forward to seeing the completion of your project.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. And I just wanted to say thank you very much for your presentation. And I have no problems supporting this. I think the education piece, the community piece, the environmental piece, I mean, it just benefits all of us. And I think that sometimes, not all, but sometimes councils and governments get caught up in boundaries. And these boundaries, in my mind, are arbitrary. They're human, created by humans, and they mean absolutely nothing to whales. They mean nothing to the Brant. They don't know that they're in Parksville. They don't have a map. It doesn't matter. The environment belongs to all of us. All water runs downstream, and I think this is a really, really great project.
Any further discussion? Councillor Patterson and Councillor Beil.
Thank you, Your Acting Worship, and thank you so much for your presentation. Like Councillor Powell, I really appreciated sitting at a table and having a discussion on that with Faye. I knew her for many years. But my question is that you had First Nations up on the screen prior. Have you made a presentation to them, or have you had discussions at this point in time?
Yes, we're talking to the Qualicum First Nations, Michael Wakama, about two things. One, we're hoping that they have an artist that maybe could contribute some art in terms of maybe painting on part of the structure. And the second thing is we are going to talk about the Qualicum First Nation and their relationship to nature. So there will be a sign that has a story about them.
I very much look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Beil.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And I would just like to echo great respect and friendship with Faye Smith. So she'll be remembered by so many people. Just a little question. Does that mean our city logo gets some visibility somewhere in there? Is the plan to have some...
The question is how big is it?
Yeah. No, I just mean, in terms of the interpretive side, but that there would be an opportunity.
We haven't determined the size of the signs for the donors yet, but anyhow, it's coming.
Thank you. Well, we have Qualicum right outside on our building here, so why not? Let's all get together.
Any further discussion before I call the vote? Who's going to tell me?
Could I just make one comment, Your Honor? One of the things that was important to us, and obviously important to the council in Qualicum Beach, was the fact that they have this grant money to work on the east side of the waterfront down there. And so they're very anxious they had disregarded the west side. So it just happened, the timing was right, not for Faye, but at least in her memory it was, that we had this site and the idea came forth at that particular time. So it actually bookends both sides of the beach, and it fits in very nicely. So.
A quick question.
Is it also possible for individuals from the community to contribute? And I'm just wondering if, the press might be able to let people know how they could do that if they wish to contribute individually.
Yes, and we've got some brochures here that if you wish I could leave with each of you, we could leave with each of you. It'll give you those details. Thank you for asking. And just one more point I'd like to make. Just like maybe fish don't know boundaries, Faye didn't know boundaries either. Wherever there was a problem or an opportunity, she was there. And one last comment, Qualicum Beach, this year, I know you support the Brant Festival with, I think, $5,000. And Qualicum Beach hasn't been for a few years, but this year Qualicum Beach gave $2,500 to the Brant Festival. So more sharing of.
Thank you. So who's going to tell Mark we gave Qualicum Beach $2,500? He'll never let me sit here again. So the motion is to contribute $2,500 to the Stream Keepers project, and then money for it to come from council contingency. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously, and thank you very much. Okay, we have two pieces of correspondence tonight. The first one is from the BC Yukon Command of the Royal Canadian Legion. It's support of the annual military service recognition book. There's a recommendation there. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Powell. Do we have any discussion? The motion is to receive. Go ahead, Councillor Beil.
Yes, thank you. I'm just wondering if through to our CAO, if what we have contributed, I know the motion is to receive, but I'm also wondering what we have contributed to this in the past, because I believe we have. About a quarter
apparently
page.
we did a half page, black and white half page.
So there's a motion on the floor right now, Councillor Salter, to receive the information, but that motion would certainly be in order after this one is dealt with. Any further discussion? Motion to receive. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Councillor Salter.
Bryce. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I would like to make a motion to go with a half a page again, like we did last year, for the Legion for their military service recognition book.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Salter made the motion. Councillor Powell seconded it. Any further discussion? See none. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. The second piece of correspondence we have is the Township of Spalmachine. A letter of support for the adoption of a flexible ride-sharing regulation in the province of BC. Do I have a mover and a seconder that the information be received? Moved by seconder Councillor Beil, seconded by Councillor Powell. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. We have 6 reports. Item number 6, we have reports, council reports. First one is for Director of Planning. Mr. Russell, would you give us the background on the issue regarding the consideration of proceeding with notice for an application to permanently change the license capacity of the lounge at Tinamera, 1155 Resort Drive?
Certainly, if I may, Your Worship. So for council consideration this evening is to proceed with notice in order to provide a comment either in support or in opposition to a liquor license change at the Tinamera Resort, or option 3 is to opt out of providing comment. In this particular case, the applicant is seeking to expand their liquor primary licensed lounge from 60 persons to 77 persons within the existing confines of their establishment. They're seeking to repurpose an underutilized section of their of one of their dining rooms. The recommendations are as per the report to proceed with notice.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Councillor Burden. Seconded by Councillor Patterson. Any further discussion? Any discussion on the recommendations? Seems pretty straightforward. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. The next item is Mr. Russell's again. Would you give us the background on the issue regarding consideration of an application for a permanent change to the license capacity of the lounge at Mount Arrowsmith Brewing Company, 109 425 Stanford Avenue East?
Certainly, if a mayor worship. The applicant is seeking to increase the license capacity of their lounge endorsement, which is part of their manufacturer's license, from 45 to 81 persons. Notice has been provided in 2 issues of the Parksville Collicum PQB News, as well as a sign placed on the property. In response to the collection of the provisioning of notice, 31 correspondence were received. The correspondence received all appear positive and were attached to the agenda for council consideration. So this evening, council has 2 options to provide a recommendation either in support or opposition to the application. The recommendation is per the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Burden. Discussion on the recommendation. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I did read all the comments from the public. What I'm concerned about is there only seems to be one from across the street in that direct area, and I know it's a residential area. And I know, too, that they've had a food truck there that is pretty noisy, and so there's different things that have already been brought up to me. But I did check with the seating, and there's no law about the number of seating when it's a craft beer establishment and when it's a lounge. When does it move up? I know that the Rod and Gun Club seats 160 people, so we're looking from 45 to 81. Is that correct?
If Mayor Worship, that would be the occupant load of that part of the building. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's that many physical seats there. Okay. It's based on the square footage of that part of the building.
Okay, and it was my understanding as well that they're going to be offering some food services. I went in and spoke with one of the people that was working there the other day. Is that correct too?
I'm not privy to that information.
Anyways, those are my concerns because we have comments from Coombs, the News, Nanaimo, pardon? Yeah, Delta, and there's only one. There's 6 from Parksville and only 1 from that area, and so I'm wondering how much weight we should put by that. Like, can anybody maybe through you to the CAO? How much weight do we put in that?
Ms. Comas?
Your Worship, that's a very subjective question, and it is. I mean, you could look at it that the reason that people didn't respond locally is because they didn't have a problem with it. Or you could say that people didn't respond because maybe they didn't know about it. But we advertised it. It was advertised well enough for other people to find it and make comments. So whatever weight council chooses to give to those responses is your prerogative. But if people don't respond and don't show that they're against it, then it's pretty hard to make a determination as to whether or not they even have an opinion on it. They may not believe that it's an issue for them, so they don't respond. It's hard to tell.
Thank you, Ms. Comas. Did you have something further, Councillor Powell? Councillor Salter, then Councillor Beil.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. And my feeling is similar to Councillor Powell. There were 6 people from Parksville who responded, and I mean, there's people from the News and Arrington and Hilliers. They would not be impacted by this establishment. And I have to say, I don't really have a feeling about whether there's 45 or 81 or 100 or it's not. I don't personally have a feeling about it, and it's probably because I don't. It doesn't impact me. Having said that, though, I also feel the same way about that development right across the road. I know that there were folks here the last time that we, did our thing with the brewery, and My feeling is that I don't know how people feel. I don't think that this was a good enough, that we got enough input back, and I'm wondering if there would be some other way that we could do this, whether extending it or getting that information out there so that people know it's coming, and then they can respond to it. So I think it would, I don't want to approve it and then us have to reconsider it later because we didn't do our due diligence now. And I also don't think we should give them, you know, that feeling that we've supported them and then change our minds on the next meeting when we get a whole pile of, you know, negative feedback. So I would like more feedback than that we received. I would like to extend it. So maybe that's a motion. Make a motion to extend the feedback time frame.
It's actually a motion on the floor for the recommendations here. We could do it. Ms. Comas, you wanted to weigh in on this?
Yes, if Your Worship, thank you. If I could just clarify is that we can't extend it. This is a statutory process, and it's the province's process. And basically, council's just council's not actually approving this. Council's just saying whether or not they have any concerns with it or that they are okay with it to the province, and the province makes the ultimate determination as to whether or not they approve this. But the advertising process for this is actually more robust than a public hearing or a rezoning is. So, you know, we have advertised it. It's like any other public consultation. We can't force people to respond. Perhaps the people that live across the street have now had the place under operation for a while and don't have a concern with it. We have no way of knowing because they haven't told us. But it's very hard to intimate what someone is thinking when they don't respond to the process.
Okay, I still have. Yes, you were up. Go ahead, Councillor Salter.
And so my follow-up is brief. We've been in this position before, and we've had the feedback before, and so I'm saying it would be better for us to be ahead of that curve. Having said that, I recognize what you're saying. You think, you know, we've done what we had to do, and whatever happens. But for me, I think for always around for the business. You know, it should be solid for them and for the community as well. And I don't feel that there was enough response here. So my feeling is they probably did not know.
Thank you, Councillor Salter. I have Councillor Beil, Councillor Burden, Councillor Patterson, and then Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I would like to speak in support of the application. One thing that I did learn from a bit of research that I was doing is that this particular property is zoned so that a restaurant, for instance, would be allowed, and a restaurant could be in place that is serving liquor, serving alcohol, and there wouldn't be an issue at all. It wouldn't even come to us unless they were needing to extend the hours. This present business, the hours are till 10 in the evening. The sign that's out in front of that premises right now is an absolutely huge sign directly facing the roadway and therefore the people across the road. I suspect that at least to some degree, but I don't know for sure, that people who had some concerns have hopefully had those fears alleviated. I too had heard something about a food truck concern, but that isn't actually what we're looking at here this evening, and I believe that if there is any ongoing concern about a food truck and how it's operating, that can and should be dealt with separately. So I do want to support this application, and it is up to the province. We're not actually approving it or not, but again, a restaurant or some other business could be in place there, and we wouldn't have any say over it at all. So I understand that they're behaving quite responsibly. Generally, a brew pub where they are actually brewing the beer caters to, let's say a mellow clientele, and I would hope that would be continued.
Councillor Beil. I'll go to Councillor Patterson. She's been so patient.
Thank you, Your Acting Worship. Like Councillor Beil, I echo a lot of her comments because I am in a restaurant-type field in the other hat that I wear and that I serve alcohol. I didn't have to come before this council when I did my liquor license. I had a food and liquor license application. This is strictly for the increase. And like you said, it's a very large sign that's out front. And again, I think that we will deal with food truck and noise issues and everything separately. All we're doing and everything today is the statutory requirements of the BC liquor licensing laws. And I'd also like to say that Mount Arrowsmith Brewing is a good corporate company in this community. And they've also won BC Craft Beer.
Best little brewery in the province, yeah.
And I'd like to see another location at some point in time. That in the downtown core, perhaps. So, like some of the other councillors around the table, I do support this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Burden?
My comments are redundant at this time. I wanted to point out that as an award-winning brewery, they probably are running a reputable business, and I'm sure those things were taken into account. And not having heard from anybody across the street, I don't think is a testament to the lack of advertising, but probably more to the evidence that they are running a good operation and that there's no need for concern.
Thank you, Councillor Burden. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Worship. I'm sorry, I guess I was misunderstood. I was questioning. I did do the research that I needed to do before I came tonight. The response that the CAO gave me regarding the process, which is a statutory process, this won't be coming back to council again. I guess one of my pet peeves is making a decision and then turning around and changing that decision depending who's in the audience. And so I fully support this.
Any further discussion? Well, I just want to comment that, it's always difficult when you're put into position to make decisions. Are you making the decision that's reflective of what the community wants? And, we have our processes and how we gauge what the community wants. And what we've done here, I believe, is we've done our due diligence the same way we would with any other application, and we didn't get any responses back. So, we have to go with what we have in front of us. I think our process has been followed. I believe the process that we've gone through this time with respect to advertising to the public is the same one when it initially came before council last year. And at that time, there were people that came out and spoke in opposition to that. Perhaps I would guess that they had the same access to the notification process this time as they would have last time. So I'm going to go along the lines of Councillor Burden and believe it's because that they've shown that they can be good neighbors there, and that people are not upset with the proposed change that they're requesting. So on that note, I will call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Thank you very much. Mount Arrowsmith. Okay, Mr. Russell, would you give us the background on the issue regarding consideration of proceeding with notice for a development variance permit to facilitate an accessory carriage house at 733 Ermineskin Avenue, please?
Sure, if I may, Your Worship. For council consideration this evening is to proceed with notice to allow for an existing accessory building to be converted into an accessory carriage house. The building is almost compliant at sitting at 2.9 meters away rather than the 3 that would be required as an accessory carriage house. So this is asking for council's permission to proceed with notice. I will note, I just noted there's a typographical error in the report with this particular type of application. Notice is provided within 5 meters of the subject property. In other words, those properties that abut this property would receive notice. That's as part of the accessory carriage house conversion provision that council recently enacted. So I apologize for that typographical error, but that's how the notice proceeds for this type of application.
Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Beil. Discussion. We're talking about moving forward on a 10-centimeter variance, I think. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Mr. Russell, would you please give us the background on the issue? Councillor Beil. Councillor Beil is recusing herself because it's her neighbor. They don't get along. Mr. Russell, would you please give... It's part of the record now, I guess. Mr. Russell, would you please give us the background on the issue regarding a follow-up report, consideration of a development variance permit to facilitate repurposing an existing single-family dwelling as an accessory carriage house at 443 Pioneer Crescent?
Certainly, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I may, Worship, so the required notice has proceeded. This notice was within 50 meters because of the type of variance isn't within the normal, the relaxed parameters. In this particular case, they're looking to try to retain an existing dwelling as an accessory carriage house. In that capacity, it exceeds the standard 90 square meter requirement, being at 157.3 square meters. And that is the purpose of the application. My understanding is one correspondence has been received in opposition. I believe that has been forwarded to Council.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Before I ask for a mover and a seconder for the recommendation, I would invite any member of the public in attendance tonight, if they wish to speak, to come to the microphone and state your name and civic address for the record, please. I believe that means nobody wishes to speak to it. So do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Burden, seconded by Councillor Powell. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Beil should be, or can we get a vote on it, or no? Just invite her back anyway? Okay. Mr. Russell, you indeed are a busy man. So again, I go to you. Would you please give us the background on the issue regarding a follow-up report consideration of a development variance permit for a proposed subdivision at 575 Pym Street North?
If I may, Your Worship, the required notice has proceeded. At this time, no correspondence have been received with respect to the variance request. The variance requests are related to the fact that the properties are being derived from a triangular-shaped piece of property. The result is that towards the back of the properties, they will be narrower than the standard bylaw requirement. The recommendations are as per the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Before I ask for a mover and seconder, I would invite anybody from the public who wishes to speak to this issue. Please come to the microphone. State your name and civic address for the record, please.
Yes, good evening. My name is Robert Livingstone. I live at 602 Talbot Terrace, which is right behind this proposed new subdivision. Between me and 608, I guess we're going to be affected most by this subdivision as we back right onto the property now. I have no problem with the developer who we moved there about it'll be 2 years in July, and at that point there was just my house and the house across the street, which is at 601, that was finished. In the last year and a half that the subdivision, 13 houses have been built. I've been being retired, I got nothing better to do. Go out and watch, and they've proven they've been a responsible corporate business, I guess, when it comes to looking after the community and the people in the neighborhood, addressing all our concerns. I talked to the guys, the workers there, and they do a good job safely, and there's no problem with time frame, 7 o'clock. Things shut down and they don't start up before 7. A couple of times they did, and then just because the time where the backhoe had to do something late or something like that. I just want council to know that we support, my wife and I, and Casey, who lives at 608, who are probably affected by this new zoning. We'd be the ones that would be affected most, being backed right onto it. And we have no concerns with it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's certainly powerful to have somebody that's directly impacted to come and speak directly to council. So thank you for coming and providing us that feedback tonight.
Thank you.
Does anybody from council have anything?
I just want to say thank you for that, for letting us know that, Rob, and I think I remember you from high school, don't I?
Yeah, we went to school. I moved back here after being away 40 years.
A little later. So do we have a mover and a seconder for the recommendations, please? So it can move by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Salter. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Is that it for you, Mr. Russell? I think it might be. That's all you came prepared for anyway? Okay, Ms. Tardif, would you please give us the background on the issue regarding the public engagement regarding plastic bag ban?
Thank you, Your Worship. Council directed staff to undertake a public consultation process through an online survey and social media to gauge feedback about a citywide ban on the use of plastic bags. Response to the survey was excellent, with 593 surveys completed and about 1,800 comments. 183 surveys were completed by non-Parksville residents who live within the Oceanside region and who indicated that all or most of their shopping occurs in Parksville. Residents are passionate and well-educated about the issues and environmental concerns caused by the ongoing use of plastic bags. Almost all respondents indicated a strong support for reduction, reuse, recycling of plastic bags, even though they did not support an outright ban. Parksville-only residents were 58% in favor of a ban and 41% opposed. This result was exactly the same when we factored in the non-Parksville residents, did it as a total. Parksville businesses completing the survey indicated 56% in favor and 44% against, so very similar. The majority of the comments from businesses indicated a ban would not affect their individual business. The recommendation is as per the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Tardif. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Beil, seconded by Councillor Powell. Any discussion? Go ahead, Councillor Burden. This is the motion to receive the report. Motion to receive? Yes, it is. Any further discussion on the motion to receive? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Next item, Mrs. Keeler, would you please give us the background on the issue regarding the corporate policy manual update? And boy, you guys move quick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report outlines amendments to 2 existing policies, the video surveillance and permissive tax exemption policies, and proposes a new policy as directed by Council, outlining the City of Parksville's commitment to meaningful reconciliation with First Nations. And recommendations are per the agenda.
Thank you, Ms. Keeler. Do we have a mover and a seconder for the recommendations? Moved by Councillor Salter, seconded by Councillor Beil. Any discussion? I want to say thank you to staff for the quick turnaround on those items. They were suggestions at the last, or they were motions that were at the last council meeting that have come to fruition at this council meeting, and I was responsible for a couple of them, and you hit the mark exactly where we were, what the intent I had. So thank you very much for that. Call to question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Okay, reports. Ms. Kaler, would you please give us the background on the issue regarding the election cost-sharing agreement with School District 69 Qualicum?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report seeks council approval of an election cost-sharing agreement with the School District 69 Qualicum for the upcoming general election to be held in October 2018. If approved, the agreement will formalize the process and cost-sharing arrangement in advance of the election and will benefit the voters by allowing them to vote for council members and trustees at the same time. And recommendations are per the agenda.
Thank you, Ms. Keeler. Do we have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Burden, seconded by Councillor Beil. Any discussion? Pretty straightforward. No, Councillor Burden? No. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Yeah, I'm trying. Ms. Keeler, would you please give us the background on the issue regarding Jensen Avenue West public engagement?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the fall of 2017, Council directed staff to prepare and advertise a request for proposals seeking a consultant to undertake public engagement on the future use of the city-owned lands at Jensen Avenue West and Alberni Highway beside City Hall. The RFP was advertised from October 12th until November 14th, 2017. As a result, 6 bids were received before the deadline. The city uses a 2-envelope system for this process, which results in the proposals being ranked prior to the fees being known. And then when the 2 top bids are established, the fees for those 2 consultants are opened, and the consultant with the lower bid would be recommended for selection. Council had established a budget of $50,000 for this project, and both bids were over this budget. The top-ranked proposal was submitted by Modus and had a base project fee of $53,370, not including expenses and taxes, but also included an optional fee of an additional $11,925 if Council wished to receive a more detailed analysis of the options that were identified as a result of the consultation. The total fee would be a minimum of $65,295, which does not include additional direct costs for meetings, facilitated events, and other documentation that would be required. And this is estimated to be about $5,000 to $7,000 in additional funds. The proposal would require significant staff support, or will require significant staff support, specifically from the administration and communications departments, but also requiring some additional support from other departments of the city. The recommendation from staff is to receive the report for information, and staff respectfully request further direction from Council on how they would like to proceed.
Thank you, Ms. Keeler. Do we have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation to receive the report? Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Salter. Discussion. Councillor Burden.
So I have to say that I'm disappointed that the responses were as they were. I continue to believe that we need to do something significant with this parcel of land. It's my personal belief that it's a great opportunity to look at an attainable housing situation, to provide housing that's affordable for people who work in our community but are unable to afford to work in our community. I believe there are some other options that we can pursue, and I'm going to do some research and bring those forward at a further meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Burden. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I haven't called a vote on this yet. Seeing none, all those in favor of receiving the report? Opposed? Thank you. Ms. Keeler, would you please give us the background on the issue regarding strategy for cannabis regulation? And I got to say again, you're so timely because the province came out this afternoon, and look at that, just like that on council agenda that night. So go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Council is well aware, the Government of Canada has announced legalization of cannabis to commence on July 1st of this year. After July, it will be legal to grow, sell, and possess cannabis for non-medicinal purposes. The province has announced that it intends to permit the sale of cannabis from both private and publicly run stores, and it will manage the distribution of the product to these stores from the liquor distribution branch. The minimum age for possession will be 19 years, the same as it is for alcohol in BC. The province has not made all of the announcements about how it will manage the legalization framework, or specified in 100% what local governments will be able to regulate. Due to the uncertainty, several municipal law experts are recommending that local governments ban all cannabis-related activities outright until the provincial and federal regimes are known and municipalities have had adequate time to prepare regulations that work for their specific communities. This report seeks council approval to commence the process of prohibiting cannabis-related activities in the city until there is more certainty about the provincial and federal regimes, but also asks council to endorse a community consultation process that would allow residents to submit their comments about how they would like to see cannabis regulated in the city. There are sample survey questions attached to the report, which have been prepared using questions from other Canadian communities who have embarked on these processes, and also from examples of the rules that have been enacted by Denver, Colorado, and local governments in Oregon State. It should be noted it's still not completely clear what local governments will be allowed to regulate, but current municipal authority appears to support land use and business license regulations as are outlined in the survey, and recent announcements today seem to support that we would be able to regulate many of the items in the survey. And recommendations are per the report.
Thank you, Ms. Keeler. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Salter, second by Councillor Powell. Any discussion? Councillor Burden?
So I've got a couple of questions around the public consultation piece. There was a public consultation that the province undertook prior to their process. Do we have any indication of what our participation as a community was, other than council made some recommendations?
Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Burden, the results were not broken down in that manner. The way they were broken down was by the types of organizations. So we know that roughly 140, I think, local governments participated, and the City of Parksville was one of those governments, but we don't have an indication of how many of the 48,000 people that completed the surveys were from either from the island or from Parksville. It wasn't broken out in that manner.
Well, thank you, Councillor Burden. Further follow-up?
So, given that process, what are our time frames going forward in terms of matching the federal government's time frame?
And Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Burden, we were proposing a time frame to consult with the community for at least 4 to 6 weeks to give people adequate time to research and figure out what they think they would like to see. We have heard from the provincial staff that they believe everything will be solidified provincially by around May, which gives us a very short time frame to have anything in place by July. But a couple of other communities and corporate officers that I've been speaking with are considering bringing in regulations with an enforcement or an enactment date that would be later. So, for example, council could consider a bylaw in July, but it wouldn't come into effect until January 1st of the following year, so that it gives everybody time to understand what the new rules will look like. Other provinces have announced different ways of approaching this. Primarily they're selling through public organizations, so there's a little bit less concern, I would say, from the local governments in those situations. But once council has given us direction, we can adopt a bylaw in about 4 meetings. So 2 months, is that right? We would have to go through a public hearing process because it affects our bylaws. So it's not like our administrative bylaws where we can do 1 to 3 readings and then adopt. We'd have to do 2 readings, public hearing, and then adoption. So a relatively quick turnaround once we know what council would like to see in those actual bylaws.
Thank you very much. Councillor Burden?
The last one. Well, it is the last one. This is what I'd like to see. I do want to see some public consultation, but I also want to see a fairly quick turnaround. We're surrounded by other jurisdictions. I don't want it to turn into fireworks where we're the only jurisdiction and we get the impact of the negativity of the fireworks, and we have to deal with those issues without reaping any of the potential benefits. So I'd like to see a quick turnaround. I'd like to see a public consultation, and those are my thoughts.
Any further discussion? So on the motion, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. I suspect the notion of cannabis regulation might appear up on the odd ballot in the upcoming elections, perhaps referendum questions in some communities. Councillor Beil.
This question to the chair, if I may. My understanding is that we have just passed the motion to receive the report, and we have not done anything further. Is that correct? Or have
we passed a motion. There was two recommendations. One
perfect.
to receive it, and then
to move
direct
ahead.
it to amend.
Thank you.
You're good?
Thank you. I'm good. Yeah.
Right? Okay, we're good. Thank you. Ms. Keeler, would you please give us some of the background regarding the request for discharges of a restrictive covenant from 1458 Industrial Way?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the city's administration department received a request from the owners of 1458 Industrial Way to remove a restrictive covenant from the title of the property. The covenant limits the use of the site to RV sales and service until such time when all municipal services have been upgraded to current city standards. The covenant was registered at the time of rezoning in the year of 2000 because the applicant was not completing the upgrades that would typically be required prior to rezoning approval. As a result, Council did not grant the full benefit of the industrial zone, and the covenant further notifies future purchasers that the upgrades were not completed prior to the industrial zone being approved. Comments on the proposal have been received from the Planning and Engineering departments. The city's development engineer indicates that water, storm, and sanitary sewer services are in compliance with the city's current standards, but road frontages have not been upgraded at this point. Should Council be willing to consider the application to discharge the covenant, it is recommended the proposal be advanced to public hearing. If Council is not willing to consider the request to discharge the covenant at this time, staff requests a motion to deny the application.
Thank you, Ms. Keeler. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation that the report be received? Moved by Councillor Powell, seconded by Councillor Salter. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried.
Yes, sir.
There's now I guess would be an opportunity for Council direct staff to start the statutory process. Is that the motion that we're looking for? If you could help us with what the wording for that would be?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there are two options that staff can see at this point. One is if Council is willing to consider the applicant's proposal, we would request that it be advanced to a public hearing. And if Council is not comfortable or does not believe they wish to entertain the request at this time, they would somebody would make a motion to deny the application.
Thank you very much, Ms. Keeler. So we're stuck. What are we going to do? What's the pleasure of Councillor? Councillor Burden, then Councillor Salter.
So I just have a question first. Are there any financial implications with removing the? Was there some sort of an agreement at the time the covenant was placed that the developer would do the road work?
So
if I may, Councillor, Your Worship, through to Councillor Burden, in a sense, that's what this covenant does. While the covenant is in place, it ensures that whoever the current landowner is completes the work. With the covenant removed, it passes down to whoever builds a building at some point in the future over $200,000 in value. They would then be the ones that would trigger the works.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Councillor Salter?
So just, so at this point, the storm sewer upgrades are in compliance with the requirements, but the road frontages are not. And so if we were to direct or to make a motion to advance it to a public meeting, could we ensure that all those standards were met or not?
So, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Salter. So the reason why we're asking for a public hearing is because the original process to put the covenant on the property included a public hearing. So we're trying to mimic the same process so that anybody who was interested the first time around and would have attended the public hearing would be given that opportunity to represent their interest to Council. If Council decides to discharge the covenant, then the applicant would get the full benefit of all of the industrial uses without having to complete the road frontage upgrades at this point. In the future, if somebody were to construct something on the property, as Director Russell mentioned, they would trigger the Works and Services bylaw, which would require them to upgrade the road frontages at that point.
So follow up. So I would like to make a motion then. So I would like to make the motion that we advance this, the staff advance this to a public meeting.
Moved by Councillor Salter. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Patterson. Any discussion on the motion? Ms. Keeler, do you wish to say something?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. May I clarify that Council would be supportive of us advancing it to public hearing on March 5th at the upcoming Council meeting? Is that agreeable?
Okay, so that's the details of the motion. I have a question. Go ahead, Councillor Beil.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And so just to clarify, if this covenant is discharged, nonetheless, at a future date, when and if the owner, whoever that is, develops this property to the value of $200,000 or greater, that will in fact trigger the requirement to do that road work and put those lights in. But is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so the negatives to this are perhaps not too great if this is discharged, in your opinion?
If I may worship through to Councillor Beil, I think that the only significant barrier really is to a purchaser of a property who has that registered on title may be more apt to have an understanding that those works have not been completed. Whereas if it's not registered on title, unless they come into City Hall and specifically ask if there's any off-site works, that's really the difference between the two approaches as far as the negative connotations. Ultimately, at some point, one way or the other, works or services will be completed. This may allow for some earlier benefit of some of the breadth of what the zoning allows for without completing those works. But if anyone does anything substantial on the property, works would be required ultimately.
Thank you. So are we, is the city putting ourselves into a liability, any increased liability situation by discharging this covenant?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I think that basically there is a due diligence on the part of a future owner. I think, especially if we are to follow the public process that was originally undertaken to put this on the property in the first place, we don't have any liability there. It's really, I think, more of a public service question in that we're going above and beyond leaving a covenant on a property. However, the public process would have a similar function in some respects by advising anybody who is interested in purchasing this property. I believe it is currently for sale. That would eliminate any liability, in my opinion.
I remember a similar situation we were faced with here in council, and it had to do with fences. And the property owner wasn't aware of that the fence was outside of what was acceptable, notwithstanding that our people from the city told the developer, don't build the fence that high. And the developer built the fence that high, sold it to the new property owner without telling them. Had there been a covenant in place in that scenario, they would have had to tell them that. So we're removing a covenant which is a protection for a potential buyer. I'm torn at this because one thing I feel like this might be a barrier to some development, and I'm committed to removing barriers. But on the other hand, I think there's a reason why covenants are on properties, and that there's a very good legal precedent why councils would choose to do that. So I'm not convinced that I don't see the reasoning, a solid reasoning for us to remove the covenant. I don't think the circumstances today are a lot different than what they were when the covenant was originally placed. So I'm not understanding what benefit it would be for us to do that. I mean, it would be perhaps it may enable something for the owner of the property to achieve better utility out of their property, but it does take away the transparency. One thing that this council prides themselves on, I believe, or I like to think we do, and a prospective buyer then wouldn't be advised of that. So I'm really uncomfortable with supporting this. It's because of, on the one hand, like I said, I think it might be a barrier to the development of the property, but at the same time, I think we have a responsibility to prospective buyers. Councillor Beil?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I share your concerns. I'm really quite torn about this. First of all, I just thought I'd be against this, and then I thought, well, maybe it's all right. My question is this: if there was an undeveloped piece of property in zoned industrial, or if it's light industrial or whatever the zoning is there now, because I understand this came about as part of a rezoning application and going forward, but if there is an undeveloped piece of property that has this zoning down in that area that didn't have anything done, I presume that the same rules would apply, that once you did $200,000 worth, it would trigger. If someone purchases such a piece of property without anything on it, what mechanism is in place so that they are fully aware that they would need to complete those works and services, under certain conditions?
If Mayor Worship, through to Councillor Beil, the insurance would really be to consult with the community planning and building department to discuss what to do their due diligence, what their needs would be before purchasing the property, to find out what's involved for approvals to get the building approved and develop the site.
Thank you, Councillor Beil.
Thank you. So if in this case then, if this covenant was removed, it actually is almost more of a level playing field in that this property is now would be the same as any other property that might be zoned in a similar fashion but that hasn't been developed?
If I may, Worship, through to Councillor Beil, essentially, yes, I will add one slight maybe twist to that answer. Typically, when site-specific zoning applications are presented to the city takes a higher level of due diligence with respect to the servicing than if a blanket type zoning change happens on the land, because we're kind of putting almost like a hallmark seal of approval on a specific piece of property. When we're doing it on an individual specific basis, there's sort of a higher level of due diligence that we undertake in those kind of scenarios, but essentially, yes, it would be the same as those other properties that were part of a more blanket type rezoning in the area.
I think, Councillor Beil, I have, which list am I on? Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And so I just want to clarify, so it's my understanding that this is not a blanket yes from council. This is simply, now is going to the public, is going out for public process and their input, and then it comes back again to council. So at this point, this is not this is not council agreeing. This is saying let's get it out to the public, let's get some feedback, and then let's make a decision. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Salter, that is correct.
Councillor Patterson.
Councillor Salter asked my question, or rephrased it that way.
Councillor Salter's comments reassured me too. We can go through the statutory. I'd be comfortable going through the statutory process. So, any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Ms. Keeler, would you please give us the background on the issue regarding Parksville Council Procedure Bylaw?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So at the last meeting, Council directed staff to amend the procedure bylaw to ensure members of Council receive their agendas 1 week prior to meetings. Additional changes were needed to comply with provincial legislative requirements, and staff was already working on these, and so it was timely to bring them together before Council. Some of the requirements are basically around the timing for elections and inaugural Council meetings after general elections. Staff have prepared a new bylaw for Council's consideration that updates the current bylaw with some new definitions to more closely match the Charter, and the Community Charter requires public notice of the intent to adopt a procedure bylaw. It's a slightly different process for these types of bylaws. And so we're recommending that this would be advertised in the Parksville Qualicum News on February 13th and 20th, and it would come back for an additional consideration of adoption by Council on March 5th, if Council is willing to advance it to the statutory process today.
Thank you, Ms. Keeler. Do we have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Burton, second by Councillor Salter. I just noticed was I supposed to be recording this all night? We have to start over again? Yeah. No, we're good. So we have a motion that the procedure bylaw be received and that the council procedure bylaw be advanced to the statutory process. Further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Again, thank you to staff for the amazingly quick turnaround on that. We have 3 readings of 1 bylaw. I guess it ties into our previous council bylaw to regulate the proceedings of council. So the council procedure bylaw, do I have